At 26 years old, I have traveled extensively as a wanderer, experiencing many places around the world. I've heard a lot about the Appalachian Mountains, particularly their famous landscapes. As a traveler, exploring new locations has always held a special significance for me. It was February, early in the morning when I prepared my breakfast and loaded my belongings into my car. I intended to explore this area alone and had set aside several days for this purpose. Accordingly, I packed my car with everything I would need. I had marked specific places on my map to explore according to the days I planned to spend there. The Appalachian region covers a vast area, so I had pre-selected key spots to visit during my journey. As evening approached, I parked my car in a designated parking area and took a moment to appreciate the serene atmosphere around me. There was silence everywhere, broken only by the gentle rustle of the wind. I wandered aimlessly for a while, having already begun my trail. After some time, I came across a clearing. By this point, I had covered several miles and had taken breaks at various spots to eat and drink. I was deep within a forested area and was now searching for a place to set up my camping tent. As I ventured further into the woods, I stumbled upon a beautiful lake. I decided to sit on a bench by the lake's edge. The tranquility of the water and the soft sound of the waves transported me to another world. Suddenly, I started to hear some noises around me. After a moment, I heard a strange gurgling sound. It felt as if something was coming from the water, but when I looked around, I saw a tall figure emerging from the trees. He was holding a chainsaw. My heart began to race, and I realized I needed to get out of there immediately. I became anxious. As the figure approached me, I noticed that his face was twisted into a terrifying grin. He raised the chainsaw above his head and let out a scream. As he charged toward me, "What is happening?" I kept thinking as I wasted no time and started to run. My heart was racing and my breaths came in quick gasps. I kept running, convinced that if I stopped, my life would be over. I didn't even have the courage to look back. In just a few moments, I spotted headlights approaching. A car was coming. My heart filled with hope. As the vehicle neared, I rushed toward it, trying to get the driver's attention. The driver stopped and I struggled to gather my words. "Help, that man, chainsaw." I was saying anxiously, but I was struggling to articulate my words. The driver listened to me and understood the urgency of the situation. He quickly let me into the car. "What's going on?" he asked as we pulled away from the area. I explained my panic to him, but he didn't understand English. He was a Spanish speaker. However, with great difficulty, I managed to convey my message to him. We went to the police station, but when we filed my complaint, they made me feel as if my story was just a plot from a movie. "It's all in your head," they said. I thought perhaps they didn't understand me. The driver dropped me off at a tram station and I thanked him. "Take care," he said. "The Appalachian Mountains aren't as beautiful as people think. There's danger everywhere here." His words touched my heart. That night, I decided that I would only explore alone during the day from then on. I kept reassuring myself, but the memory of that night continued to haunt me. I had traveled a lot in my life, but my thoughts about this place had now changed. I had a bad experience in this area. This was during my teenage years, when I was 21. It was the best time of my friendship, as I planned a campfire outing with my two friends, Paul and Adam. We had heard about many abandoned places in the Appalachian Mountains, where people's opinions were often not favorable. We decided to embrace our adventurous spirit and teenage bravery by planning to spend the night there. All three of us lived near Tennessee, which is close to the Appalachian area. When we arrived that night, the moonlit sky illuminated everything around us. We parked our car and walked quite a distance away from it. Finding a suitable area, we set up our tents and started the campfire. As we chatted and joked, time flew by. Then we made plans to get some drinks, but when I checked our supplies, I realized we had forgotten the corkscrew. "Give me a moment, I'll go get it," I told my friends, and quickly headed back to my car. When I returned, I saw that the campfire was still burning, but my joy quickly faded. Paul and Adam were nowhere to be found. Their tents were open, but they were missing. At first, I thought maybe they were busy with something, but when I called out to them, there was no response. Feeling a strange mix of sadness and fear in my heart, I ventured a little further. There was an eerie silence, broken only by the rustle of the night breeze. Then, in my anxiety, I heard some noises. Were they my friends, or something else? I moved closer and saw a hooded figure hiding among the trees. My heart began to race. Was this some kind of joke? I couldn't understand. I thought maybe it was a prank for my friends, but as I got closer, I realized that this was truly someone else's face. "What is this?" I shouted. I turned to run, thinking about my safety. I had no idea where my friends were, but I needed to protect myself. I tried to hide, ducking behind the trees. I could see the figure slowly approaching me. It didn't make a sound, just moved quietly as if searching for something. My heart raced. Is it looking for me? I thought. I wanted to flee from there, but my legs felt paralyzed. I could hear the figure circling around me, and I remained hidden, waiting in silence for what would happen next. A few moments later, when I heard the figure move away, I thought it was my chance. I quietly emerged from my hiding spot and tried to make my way back to the campfire. However, as I approached, an odd feeling washed over me. That face, that hood, everything was still vivid in my mind. Then it hit me that I should call Adam and Paul. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. My anxiety deepened even more. I thought I needed to find Adam and Paul. I figured they might have gone a little further away or encountered something themselves. I ran back in their direction, but anxiety and fear accompanied me. After a while, I heard someone calling out to me from a distance. When I looked, I saw both of them there, but their presence made me uneasy. "Paul! Adam!" I shouted to get their attention. They heard me and came over to where I was. "Dude, we were looking for you." "Where have you been?" Adam asked, but behind my smile, the fear lingered. I felt something strange. When I came back, you guys were gone, and there was a hooded figure. I explained everything. Both friends became anxious. "What? You were scared? There's nothing out here," Paul said, but I knew what I had felt. We decided that it was time to leave. We packed up our tents and extinguished the campfire while I explained to them what I had felt. As we hit the trail, I heard footsteps nearby. My heart raced once again. I looked at Paul and Adam. Their faces had gone pale. We quickly decided we needed to get out of there. As we moved away, I realized how shaken we all were. "But I know I saw something," I said. That night was a lesson for me, and I understood that I should never venture alone on that trail. One must always stay alert because there are many secrets in the world that lie beyond our understanding. I've always had a passion for mountains, and this time I decided to embark on a solo camping trip to the Appalachian Mountains. The beauty and tranquility of the Appalachian region drew me in. I had already seen many pictures and videos on YouTube, and it genuinely seemed like a place worth visiting. For days, I had been thinking about this plan, and finally, I got the opportunity to go. When I arrived, everything was perfect. It was far more beautiful and serene than what I had seen in the videos. I chose a lovely spot where a clear stream flowed nearby. After setting up my tent, I felt completely relaxed. The first day was truly amazing. I went hiking, took some pictures, and then returned to my camp to read a good book. All around me were the sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the rustling of the wind, and the gentle flow of the water. It felt like a soothing symphony. In the evening, as I lit a small fire, the stars began to twinkle in the sky. I prepared a simple meal and thought about how peaceful this moment was. But then I heard gunshots in the distance. My heart stopped for a moment. I thought maybe it was part of hunting season, but this area was prohibited for hunting. I tried to convince myself that the sounds were just distant, but the gunshots continued, and suddenly I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I quickly packed up my food and extinguished the fire, thinking that hiding in the darkness might help me avoid those people. My curiosity, however, compelled me to see what was happening. I began to move quietly toward the sounds, blending into the shadows. After walking for about 10 minutes, I stumbled upon an open area. There was a group of men making a lot of noise, rifles slung over their shoulders. Seeing this made me realize that these people were not just hunters. Something else was happening here. My heart raced. I decided to flee, but as I began to back away, my foot landed on a twig, snapping it loudly. The men turned to look in my direction. Panic had taken over, and I ran without thinking. All I could do was flee. I leaped between the trees, ducking under low branches. My lungs burned, and my legs ached, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I could hear their footsteps getting closer. Ahead, I spotted a fallen tree with a hidden spot beneath it. I jumped in and covered myself with leaves and dirt. My breaths were rapid, and I prayed they hadn't seen me. The noise from the men gradually faded until I felt they had moved on. Gathering my courage, I slowly began to emerge, trying to remain hidden as I moved forward. When I reached my campsite, I found everything intact. However, every sound made me jumpy. I quickly packed my bags, constantly glancing over my shoulder to see if anyone was behind me. The darkness was complete, making it difficult to see. I hurriedly made my way out, using my flashlight only occasionally. After walking for several hours, just as dawn began to break, I spotted a ranger station in the distance. A sense of relief washed over me, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I hurried over and knocked on the door, feeling desperate. A ranger opened the door and looked surprised at my appearance. I quickly explained what had happened, and he invited me inside, shutting the door behind me. There, I felt a sense of security. The rangers called for backup and learned what had been happening. I told them everything, and they reassured me that everything would be all right. As they prepared to head out, I felt truly alive again. Days later, I found out that the men had been caught. They were indeed poachers, and their activities extended far beyond hunting. Justice was served, but this experience left me with an underlying fear. The forest, which once provided me with peace, had now become a frightening place. This trip was not just an adventure for me, it was a lesson. Sometimes, personal safety is the most important thing. The beauty of the Appalachian Mountains still lingers in my memories, but the fear from that day stays with me every moment. When four friends decided to go camping in a deep forest of the Appalachian Mountains, far away from people, we were all filled with excitement from the start. We thought this trip would not only be filled with adventure, but also give us a chance to spend quality time together. The beauty and tranquility of the forest made us very happy. When we arrived, everything was beautiful. Dense trees, fresh air, and the calls of birds created a perfect setup for us. We set up our tent and spent some time hiking. However, as the sun began to set, we thought it was time to head back to camp. But when we returned, we realized that we had lost our way. Nothing looked familiar. We wandered around for a while, but nothing made sense. Exhausted, we decided to take a break and sat down in a small clearing. "Let's check the map," one friend suggested. We pulled out our phones, but there was no signal. Our confusion began to grow. Just then, another friend pointed and said, "Look over there, maybe there's a cabin." We turned and started moving toward an old, abandoned cabin. Seeing the cabin made me feel uneasy. It looked quite old and creepy, but curiosity compelled me to go inside. The four of us thought, "Let's see what's in there." When we stepped inside, it was dark. Nothing seemed normal. There was just an old sofa, some tattered magazines, and a grimy table. Then I heard some voices outside. A few people were talking. We looked at each other and understood that we needed to stay quiet. We tried to hide in a corner of the cabin. The voices grew louder. "We need to get this stuff out of here. No one can find out," one man said. Another replied, "Hurry up, the police must not find out." My heart raced as I realized these people were involved in something illegal, perhaps smuggling. I glanced at my friends and their faces were filled with fear as well. We understood that if they spotted us, our lives could be in danger. We couldn't escape because there was only one way out of the cabin, and they were right there. After a few minutes, as their conversation began to quiet down, we decided it was time to run. We slowly started to make our way out of the cabin, our hearts pounding. As soon as we stepped outside and saw that no one was around, we immediately took off running. We were running through the forest, completely disoriented. The only thought in our minds was to somehow reach our campsite. It felt far away, but we turned at every bend. Finally, after a few hours, we spotted our campsite. "There it is! We're here!" one friend shouted. We quickly grabbed our bags and decided to call the police. We sent one friend to make the call, while the rest of us shared our experiences. My heart was still racing. When the police arrived, we told them everything. They reassured us that everything would be all right. The police decided to head into the forest, and we moved a little way off to wait for them. After several hours, the police returned to inform us that they had apprehended the men. While we felt a sense of relief, an odd fear still lingered. We reflected on what we had seen and experienced. What was supposed to be just a camping trip had turned into a lifelong lesson. We quickly packed our things and decided it was time to leave the forest. We reminded each other that this was all part of an adventure, but we should stay far away from any illegal activities. Time passed, and this experience became a memorable one for us. We would always remember the beauty of the Appalachian Mountains, but the fear from that day would stay with us forever. My passion for hiking always draws me toward new adventures. This time, I decided to head to Dragon's Tooth, which runs along the Appalachian Trail, thinking that its beauty and tranquility would be the perfect getaway for me. It wasn't just a challenging trail, it was also incredibly scenic. Not everyone can make this journey, but as an experienced hiker, I had no worries about going there. I grabbed my backpack, packed some essential gear, and set off. The day before, a gentle breeze had been blowing, but I thought it would only last for a moment. As I hiked, I was captivated by the beauty around me. Time passed, and I lost myself in the journey. However, as the day began to shorten, the weather started to change. Suddenly, dark clouds gathered, and the wind picked up. I realized I needed to quickly find some shelter. At first, I thought about resting for a while, but then, hearing the chilling wind and the sounds of snow, I realized I needed to take action. Suddenly, I spotted the door of an old cabin. I understood that this was my last option, so I quickly ran toward it. The cabin door was open, and as I stepped inside, I saw a man named Aiden. He didn't say much upon seeing me, but there was something hidden in his eyes. "What do you want here?" he asked, and I sensed that he was a bit suspicious. "I need shelter. The weather is really bad," I replied. Aiden simply nodded and let me in. The cabin was quite old inside, but I felt comfortable there. I placed my backpack in a corner and took a moment to relax. However, shortly after, I heard a strange noise. It sounded like people talking outside. Aiden heard it too, and his expression changed. "Why are they here?" he said with concern. I realized something was not right. Suddenly, the cabin door burst open, and 3 men entered, armed with clubs and other weapons. "Your supplies are ours," one of them shouted. I realized these people had come for supplies. I was already anxious, but now the situation had escalated. Henry tried to say something, but they ignored him. I quickly understood that I needed to do something. I glanced slowly toward the door. When they pushed Aiden, I was thinking about making a run for it. Their attention was focused on Aiden, giving me a brief opportunity. I opened the door and dashed outside without hesitation. Snow was falling outside, and the wind was so strong that I could barely move. I thought this was my last chance, so I started running with all my strength. With every step, the snow blurred my vision, but I refused to stop. The only thought in my mind was the chance to escape. I kept running through the snow until I spotted a small mountain trail. I figured that if I could reach it, I might see someone. The path was difficult to navigate, but it felt essential. I didn't hear any sounds around me, just the crunching of snow beneath my feet. Finally, I reached a small clearing where some people were gathered. I saw them and immediately ran toward them. "Help! Help!" I shouted. The people looked at me and quickly came over. I told them everything that had happened to me. They decided to call the police right away. While waiting for the police to arrive, I was still a bit anxious, but the presence of those people provided me with some comfort. The police listened to my story and then asked me to show them the location where I had encountered the men. Several hours later, the police returned to inform me that they had apprehended the men. I didn't know what had happened to Aiden, but I was just relieved to be safe. I thought of this as an adventure, but this time it had turned into the scariest story of my life. As I was leaving, I realized that sometimes things aren't easy. This incident taught me that one must always be prepared. Every journey carries its own risks, but it's essential to prioritize our safety above all else.